Your ability to access media, whether that's games or whatever else, is now contingent on systems that you can't see, can't vote for, and can't opt out of. You have no control, you have no privacy, and this is all being fueled by elites and activists that believe that they know what's best when it comes to how you live your life. I've never seen something progress so quickly and so suffocatingly when it comes to our rights as consumers and our independence. We have payment processors like Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal pressuring platforms like Steam to remove legal content, knowing all too well how difficult it is to defend the themes of those games, all in a bid to control how you spend your money. And now at the exact same time, we have the UK passing laws that effectively make it where Europeans just have to hand over all of their identification to third-party companies that we know exactly how well they handle that. Zero security. The US is doing the exact same thing. Xbox is already jumping forward to make changes based on these laws, meaning that all of this is coming to every single shore unless something is done. This goes beyond censorship. This is control. This is that cyberpunk dystopia where you own nothing, know nothing, and are nothing other than tools of convenience for corporations and the politicians that they control. While I plan to try to make this discussions revolve around video games, ultimately I'm going to have to step outside of my comfort zone. I'm going to have to talk about media more broadly. I'm going to have to talk about corporate and political interference and a lot more. So today we're going to talk about the world's war on the internet, on gaming, on freedom of expression, on our independence, and our fight against it. They think that they have the upper hand. It's time to prove they don't. Freedom of expression in media always comes under fire nearly every single year from low-effort, uneducated activists and opportunistic politicians, whether it's books, TV shows, music, movies, or games. The world's problems always seem to get pinned on art, and the people that are leading these moral crusades, well, they're never content to make personal choices. They want control over what you can access under the thinly veiled excuse of protecting the children from content that they've never engaged with, don't understand, and absolutely do not respect. Ultimately, it's parents looking for systems to raise their kids rather than themselves. Back in 1985, it was the music destroying our minds as Tipper Gore helped launch the PMRC, a group that insisted that music with explicit lyrics should be segregated and slapped with warning labels. It led to televised Senate hearings where Congress tried to shame musicians into submission. They invited Dee Snider of Twisted Sister to testify, thinking that his image would backfire: long hair, makeup, loud music. Instead, he shredded them. Calm, articulate, and unapologetic, he exposed their hypocrisy and turned the spectacle into a public embarrassment for all of the moral censors. That kind of overreach didn't stop there. In the mid-1990s, Natural Born Killers became the next target, a hyper-violent satire by Oliver Stone about two media-obsessed killers that turned into celebrities. Critics said that it glorified murder, but what it really did was terrify them because it held up a mirror to how violence gets repackaged and sold. The film was linked to some real-world crimes and even dragged into the courts by the victims' families. Despite having no real connection, the lawsuits ended up failing, but the damage was done. It was banned in multiple countries, pulled off the shelves, and became a blueprint for how moral panic can leap from outrage to censorship without even proving any harm. But eventually that spotlight turned to video games, and once it did, it never left. Mortal Kombat was one of the first to take the heat. Back in 1993, the blood-soaked fatalities ended up triggering a political firestorm, landing it in the center of U.S. Senate hearings alongside Night Trap, and the outrage was so loud, it was enough to be able to force the industry into creating the ESRB, which we still use today, a self-imposed rating board that was meant to keep the government off their backs, and yet still, despite that concession, the attacks kept coming. Doom was next. After Columbine, the media rushed to blame the shooter's love of violent video games, especially Doom, which was treated less like a product and more like a loaded weapon. There was no real evidence, but that really didn't matter because the goal was never about truth. It was about finding a scapegoat. From there, the cycle just repeated. Manhunt was banned in multiple countries for its sadistic tone and stylized executions. Grand Theft Auto became a political punching bag for nearly 2 decades now, and every time a new controversy breaks out, school shootings, violent crime, teenage aggression, someone with a podium and no understanding of the medium wants to start pointing a finger at video games, and they still do to this day. Despite decades of research showing that there is no casual link between video game violence and real-world behavior, we are still hearing the exact same lazy talking points about how games corrupt the youth, desensitize children, or promote criminal behavior. They said it in the 90s, they said it in the early 2000s, and they're still saying it today because it's easier to blame the pixels than confront real issues. Here we are today, and the only thing that's changed is that the time for talk is over, and now it's action. Content isn't just being criticized, it's being erased. Games are vanishing, storefronts are purging titles by the thousands, and it all started with a group called Collective Shout, an advocacy and lobbying organization based in Australia that claims that they are fighting against the sexualization of women and children in media. On the surface, that sounds like a noble goal, but the deeper that you look, the more it becomes clear that this isn't about safety, it's about control. Collective Shout isn't a watchdog group, it's a group of Karens imposing their morality on everybody else, often hypocritically, seeing that they defend the Netflix show Cuties. Gross. When Steam ignored their demands to remove offensive content, Collective Shout bypassed them entirely and went straight for the infrastructure. They flooded Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal with complaints, pressuring them to take action, and it worked. Payment processors then turned around and contacted Steam directly, laying out their own content standards and demanding enforcement. In response, Steam quietly added a new line in their developer policy under Rule 15. You shouldn't publish content that may violate the rules and standards set forth by Steam's payment processors and related card networks and banks or internet service providers, in particular, certain kinds of adult-only content. That one vague little sentence triggered one of the most aggressive content purges that we have ever seen. Thousands of games disappeared off of Steam and indie storefronts like itch.io within days. And let's be clear, the kind of content that they were targeting here was calculated. This was not mainstream titles. These were fringe, explicit games. The kind of games and the kind of content that is extremely difficult to defend publicly without being accused of endorsing it. That is the point. They thought that this content wouldn't spark any mass outrage if it disappeared. They picked a fight where the user base was too small, too niche, and too easy to silence, because at the end of the day, this isn't about stopping extreme content. It's about cracking the door open for systemic removal of any content someone else decides that you shouldn't be able to be allowed to engage with. These same activists and their political allies have taken aim at games like Grand Theft Auto and Detroit Becomes Human. If you guys think for whatever reason that this stops with H games and edgy horror titles, you haven't been paying attention. The strategy is simple here. Make the bans palatable at first and then push the line later. And once people get used to it, well, the next ban isn't even going to feel like censorship anymore. In fact, that point's already been proven because one of the games that got caught up in the purge on itch.io was Mouthwashing, a frontrunner for 2024 Indie Game of the Year, a psychological horror title that was intentionally disturbing, that explores trauma, guilt, grief, and violence, but it never really showed any of those things directly. No interactive assault, no graphic reenactments, not the way that we would normally see them in other games, just surreal imagery and a heavy atmosphere that was built around implication, and yet still, it was pulled. Not because it broke any laws, not because it violated any terms of service, but because payment processors had cast a net so wide that even hinting at dark themes is enough to get games erased if someone else decides that it makes them uncomfortable. This is what happens when you hand over control to systems that do not care about context. These are financial institutions, not curators of art. They don't care about game reviews. They don't understand narrative nuance. They just react to pressure, to PR risk, to liability. And when they act, platforms fall in line because they don't have a choice. This is censorship by infrastructure. No appeals, no discussions, just silence and removal. That's what makes this so different from the censorship battles of the past. It's not a debate. It's not a public outcry. It's not a policy that you can push back on, because by the time anybody notices, the decision's already been made quietly behind the curtain. It's not just about what gets removed. It's about who gets to decide and how invisible that process has become. There's no transparency, no vote, no warning, just a new rule, a new standard, and a growing silence where certain games used to be. And that's the trap, because these systems, once they fix the problem that they found, they escalate, they standardize, they start rewriting the rules behind the scenes and pretend like nothing has changed when everything has. The rules that you're governed by now aren't public, they aren't consistent, they're enforced by companies that you'll never speak to using guidelines that you'll never read. Your access is now contingent on a constantly shifting set of expectations dictated by people that aren't even a part of the culture that they're regulating. So let's stop pretending like this is about one game or one advocacy group or one rule or even one controversy. This isn't even about explicit content anymore. This is about whether anyone outside of the system is even allowed to make decisions at all, whether platforms like Steam or itch.io have the right to host legal content, whether developers have the right to explore difficult themes, whether you have the right to access art that makes someone else uncomfortable, and most importantly, whether we are allowed to choose how we spend our money. The reason why I brought up the history of how different forms of media have either been censored or regulated or come under fire from politicians or the news or from advocacy groups is to prove, or at least illustrate, that Groups like Collective Shout, while obnoxious, incredibly obnoxious, and while something to fight against, they are the symptom, not the disease. There's always going to be a group of people that are out there. They're going to try to tell you how to live your life, what you can and can't do, what you can consume, what you can buy, all kinds of different things. You have people that are out there that believe that they can tell you what kind of food you can eat. You got countries, you got governments, you got religions, you got tons of groups just like these guys that are trying to do the exact same thing every single day. And something like this is only going to continue to escalate because essentially now there's blood in the water. They got a little taste of power, and now that they got it, well, they're going to keep pushing, especially when it comes to some of these companies, because these companies want control. More importantly, they want control of your money. It's like the easiest thing for them. What if we could just cut out the middleman? What if we just cut you out entirely and just take your money? Wouldn't that just be perfect? Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Stripe, these 4 companies control the vast majority of the flow of wealth in the entire world because they are globally accepted. Not every single payment processor is globally accepted. These guys are. So that means if one of these guys stops something and blocks it, that's a problem. And if they all 4 start working together and they all block something like a cartel, like they are right now, well, nothing can get through. In that event, you have no options. There's no alternative. And that's the perfect world for these companies. They want you to not have any answers. You can't even use your debit card. Most debit cards have a Visa logo on it. That's your own money that you're not allowed to use. PayPal's the exact same thing. And Stripe, I think, is probably the same. I don't think I've ever used Stripe, but those are like the exact same thing. That's usually tied directly to your bank account. You think that's your money? Not anymore. I've seen people cry out that these are private companies, that this is a free market. What are you talking about? What world do you live in? These companies have gone far past the point of private company. They are infrastructure, critical infrastructure. You're not able to make online purchases without these guys anymore. You might be able to pay your bills, but outside of that, you're not buying anything online. And in an increasingly more digital world with more digital storefronts, that's a problem. A real problem. They're essentially a utility. They're no different than gas or electricity or water or anything else. And as time goes on, we're not going to be able to get around that. These guys have to be regulated. And if they're not regulated, well, they're our new government now. But that doesn't mean that they're without weakness. And we are fighting back. One of the reasons I've been so vocal about Stop Killing Games and why I keep bringing it up is because we desperately need to pump the brakes when it comes to our blind trust in digital storefronts and digital economies. Their growing prominence has given corporations near total control over access, pricing, availability, and now content itself. The conversation so far has been mostly focused on ownership, which is great, but there's a deeper problem beneath that. The rise of digital storefronts has handed control of actual commerce, our money, to third-party payment processors. The money that you earn, the cash that's in your account, isn't really yours if a company like Visa or PayPal decides that you're not allowed to spend it. I've seen people get distracted by the wrong targets, lashing out at Steam or itch.io as if these are the guys that are making the calls right now, but that's exactly what these payment processors want. They want the blame placed on the platform holders that had no real choice. What were their real options? Shut down payments overnight, rebuild their entire back end to use an alternative provider, one that could just as easily use the exact same restrictions at any moment, or just cut out digital payments entirely and tell players to go buy Steam cards, which are limited in supply, restricted by region, and could just as easily be pulled by the same payment processors that are pressuring these guys right now. That's the stranglehold these companies have. They don't operate in a free market. They operate above it, dictating what's allowed to exist inside. And that control isn't just economic, it's creeping into legislation. In the UK, the Online Safety Act has begun reshaping how platforms handle content, not just what they host, but how they verify who accesses it. Under the new law, websites must implement strict age verification for anything considered adult, explicit, or potentially harmful, whatever that actually means. That means real names, real documents, full compliance, and if a site can't afford the infrastructure to be able to verify users by ID, well, it just disappears. This is not about child safety, it's about normalizing surveillance. It's about conditioning people to believe that having access to legal content online should come at the cost of giving up your identity. Beyond that, this is the elimination of privacy. We know that we cannot trust these companies with our personal information. We have seen exactly what happens when our personal data ends up in the wrong hands. The T-App, that toxic social media platform that encouraged women to anonymously post photos of men and spread unverified accusations, required ID verification for its users. So when the breach hit, it wasn't just usernames that got leaked out. It was real names, government IDs, location data. But T isn't the exception. We've seen PlayStation accounts compromised, exposing emails and real names and credit card information. We've seen Facebook and social media logins linked to adult content through data leaks, leading to harassment, doxing, and career-threatening exposure. And now governments are pushing for that exact same level of personal verification to be mandatory on adult platforms, explicit game storefronts, and anything that these guys deem high risk. But that's exactly the point. These systems are not designed to protect you. They are designed to manage you. And in managing you, they strip away something deeper than your privacy. They take away your ability to choose freely without fear or compromise. This is the slow, methodical elimination of freedom of choice, not just through government regulation, but through systems that are built to enforce it quietly and permanently. Rules that you never voted on enforced by companies that you can't opt out of. Laws like the Online Safety Act that are demanding compliance from corporations that just fall in line because, well, some of these guys don't really have much of a choice, and the other ones really do like the control. Activist groups that are out there stripping away your privacy in the name of protection. Corporations stripping away your autonomy and selling it back to you as convenience. You don't get a choice in what platforms you use, how you pay, or what content you engage with, not without submitting to somebody else's conditions first. And while everybody is arguing over what political group they can blame, the truth is far more dangerous. This is just what happens when power consolidates. It doesn't matter who holds it. Once they have it, they will use it, and they will use it against you. That's what unchecked control looks like. You don't have to agree on the ideology. You just have to agree and recognize the structure and hopefully fight against it. And lucky for us, that fight has already begun. Across every front, political, cultural, and corporate, the battle lines are being drawn. These companies do not fear ethics, my friends. They fear risk, and we need to show them that we are the greater risk, that there are more of us than there are of these activist groups that they're pretending to represent. Silence is not an option. Right after Steam and itch.io began pulling content, users across 4chan and all of social media launched what they are calling Operation Fight Fire with Fire, a grassroots movement that is flooding Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, and other processors with calls and emails using the exact same tactics that Collective Shout used. This isn't rage bait, this is optics, it's numbers, it's a way of proving in an undeniable volume that actual consumer bases are watching and we're not happy. Visa is already trying to downplay their role. One Reddit user even shared a response from the company saying that they don't moderate content and they don't make moral judgments on legal purchases, but that's exactly what they did, and that's exactly what they've been doing. Their excuse is that certain purchases pose a risk to the brand, but what that actually means is that they're afraid of bad press. They want to pretend like they had nothing to do with this, maybe quietly walk it back, avoid taking the hit, but it's too late for that. The story's out, and the last thing that these companies want is for that story to stay out, because that's how their reputations start to crack, that's how investor confidence drops, and that's how regulators start circling. But even that only treats the symptom. The real cure is proper regulation and meaningful consumer protections. Meaningful consumer protections, the kind that should already exist but don't. And that's a failure that largely rests with politicians that are too entangled in lobbying and others that are just too slow to catch up with a digital economy that's evolving faster than the laws that are governing it. Right now, though, there is a sign of progress. It's a U.S. bill that was introduced back in February by Congressman Andy Barr called the Fair Access to Banking Act, which states, this bill places restrictions on certain banks, credit unions, and payment card networks if they refuse to do business with a single person that complies with the law. Restrictions include prohibiting the use of electronic funds transfer systems and lending programs, termination of institutions' depository insurance, and specified civil penalties. Banks and other specified financial institutions are allowed to deny financial services to a person only if the denial is justified by a documented failure of that person to meet quantitative, impartial, risk-based standards established in advance by the institution. This justification may not be based on reputational risk to the institution. This bill establishes the right for a person to bring civil action for a violation of this bill. This bill would essentially just cut off everything at the root. It strips payment processors of the power to act like moral gatekeepers and blocks them from being able to deny legal purchases just because they don't like the way that something looks. And while I know that the internet is full of political division, this is one of the few issues that cuts through everything. It doesn't matter where you're from, who you voted for, or what kind of content you like. This affects everyone. The only real way forward here is to put aside the usual fights, support this legislation, and push it to get it passed. Because if we don't, well, it's only going to escalate from here. And for the UK bros, I don't know what to tell you guys. The backlash started fast over there. As soon as the Online Safety Act kicked in, petitions started flying fast. They got signatures really quick, but the government's response, they essentially just brushed it off completely. And now with VPN use spiking to try to get around the law, well, a lot of people are talking about how the UK might just crack down on VPNs next, just lock everything down. What sucks is we're likely to see the effects of it over here because the law is so vague and far-reaching that even Microsoft is playing along now. Xbox is already rolling out a new age verification tool to restrict access for basic social features, all to stay ahead of the compliance laws that they have. This isn't just government overreach, it's corporate fear meeting ideology dressed up as safety, and the only move left is just to keep pushing, keep the pressure on, and most of all, guys, just don't shut up, because once this becomes normal, there's no undoing it. If you guys have watched me for any length of time, then you guys would know that I am an idealist to a fault. And I do genuinely believe that both governments and basically people all over the world severely underestimate gamers and this hobby. Because we are talking about generations of people that grew up on cooperative play. You got people that are out there that are getting world first raid kills with 500 ping and haven't slept in 3 days. You don't know what dedication looks like. Our ability to gain traction and organize from the comfort of our homes is unmatched. These guys are waging war on our turf. We have home field advantage, and believe me, we're going to use it. Beyond that, given the spread, the age spread of this hobby, these politicians and these corporations are going to have to deal with us a lot longer than they will a group of collective Karens. It is wild how fast this has progressed, both the implementation of and also the backlash. I've never seen anything like this before. And nobody has the right to tell us how to spend our money other than our government. That's the one thing that I'm going to say. And all of this is just optics over virtue. All of this is just so vain, especially how it was started. And it's just protecting people that don't want to raise their kids. That's all I see. I think I'd seen Asmongold say, talking about like making the world a padded room for everybody else when it just doesn't make any sense to do so or something like that. That's what it feels like in this case. Honestly, he's probably right. You know, when I was younger, my stepbrother, apparently he wasn't allowed to have a social media account. I didn't know anything about it. So when he asked me to let him make one on my computer, I said, yeah, sure, go ahead, man. Well, his parents ended up finding out about it. Come to find out, his dad worked for the government, and that was the reason why he was not allowed to have one. I didn't know that. But the second that they found out, they took all the computers out of their house, and they gave that kid a flip phone. One of those like cricket phones or whatever. I forgot what the name of them are, where you can only like call your parents, and that's about it. And that dude had that basically until he was like 18. Agree with the tactics or disagree with them. This is a responsibility of parents to be able to take care of. Not for the rest of the world to capitulate to the fact that you don't want to raise your kids. I'll keep an eye on this. I'm glad that I held off for a few days because I saw like where things were going, and I was like, well, I don't really want to jump in too quick. I kind of want to take my time and see how things evolve, get some more information, you know, gather my thoughts on this kind of stuff. But man, I'm glad that I made the video now. Otherwise, it was just going to get away from me. Thank you guys for watching this video, by the way. I really hope that you share this. I implore that you do, because I think that everybody needs to be aware of this. Everybody needs to be discussing this. Everybody needs to be doing everything they can to be able to stop this or get in the way of it or slow it down or whatever, because we have to do something or this is going to get pretty rough. Keep in mind that these payment processors, they love money. That's the only thing that they want. The one thing they hate more than anything is bad optics, because that means that they could lose money. So the more you keep talking about it, well, that's all we'll give them. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did enjoy the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of all of this. Where do you think this is going to go? Do you think there's any hope? Do you think I'm being too idealistic? I hope that I'm not, to be honest with you. Anyway, stay loud, stay rowdy, and stay safe. I'll catch you guys in the next one.